So I'm going to create a new service. And I want to call it account service. And in this, I want to have a new function called generate JWT token. And we're also going to have a protected virtual void called generate refresh token. Now, if I wanted, I could look at a decode here. And in .NET, it shows me that I can encode this just like this. So what I want to do is I have two choices on how to do this. The JWT library or the JSON Web Token library. We're going to do what this website says. So we'll do this one, and we're going to install web tokens. And I'll do a encode. So let's go back and remove that. And instead, we'll do it this way. So I'm going to make a token handler. And before I go any further, do I have JWT now? Nope. Okay. And then what I want to do is I want to get my key, which is encoding.ASCII to we want to get the bytes of the secret. And then I want to get a token descriptor. Security token descriptor. And my subject is a new claims identity. which is going to be a new claim of the ID and then we want to have a account ID. We want to do the expires in datetime.utcnow.addMinutes15. On our signing credentials is a new signing credentials with a new symmetric security key of the key. And we're going to use the security algorithms HMAC SHA-256 signature. And then we're going to get the token. Like that. And then we're going to do a return token handler.write token of my token. Just 1 second. Okay. So on the refresh token, I want to make this a new entity. And I want this to have on it a string for the token, a date time for when it expires, a bool for is expired, and I want that to be a pointer to datetime.utcnow is greater than or equal to expires. We have a date time for created. We have a string for created by IP. We have a date time for the revoked, a string for the revoked by IP, a string for the replaced by token, and then a bool called isActive, which we point to revoked is equal to null, and it is not expired. We also need to have a new class for an application user, which is a base entity, and we're going to call this table of application users. And each application user is going to have a number of clients. And then also a number of these refresh tokens. So a client is going to have a GUID for the application user ID. And then also a GUID here for the application user ID. And on our context now, we can add in application user and refresh tokens. Uh-oh, says 99 Sammy. What do you mean? What's the uh-oh? So on this IP address, we want to pass in the IP address. And then all I want to do is return a new refresh token, which is going to be a token a expires, so 7 days, a created, and a created by IP. Down here, I want to have a new protected virtual string called generate random token string. And we're going to use a crypto service provider called a new RNG crypto service provider. And we're going to use some random bytes here. And then we're going to use our service provider to get the bytes of my random bytes. And then we're going to convert the random bytes to a hex string by doing a bit converter .toString of my random bytes, and we're going to replace the dashes with nothing. Okay. When the dog was barking a few minutes ago. Oh, yeah. I thought my wife was back. Okay. So in this service, we're going to add in here a constructor that has a application database context. like that. And so now I'm going to just add a new method here called authenticate. We're going to call this We're going to leave it just like this for now, okay? Let's go back over here to our docs. So in our token, we want to pass in here the account service. Like that. And all you want to do here is return your token, right? With your access token. So in here, I want to have a new public virtual void called generate token asynchronous. Just generate token. And we're going to pass in here an application user. And a client. Like that. And this is going to return a token response. And we want to do a generate JWT of my client.client secret. And then my application user.id. And then I also want to get my refresh token. And that needs to be the IP of the server. And then your response here is going to be a new, it's going to be a OK of my generate token. If I look at where we did the basic auth, post for where did it talk about when you generated that? And it was base 64 encoded. The client identifier, so it's client ID. So basic auth user password. I think we base 64 it with the ID and the password. So you should be able to do a request dot headers dot authorization like that. And this is never going to work right now because in my startup, I don't have a services.addTransient, and it's a account service. And then it also needs a add database context called application database context. We want to add in here a ID, IP address issuing token. And then this one, we want to return the new token response here, which is the new JWT, the refresh token, the token type, and the expire zone. Down here, I want to do a context.refreshTokens.addMyRefreshToken. So, but your refresh token, does that get sent right away? Let me see. Yeah, it's just a string. What am I looking for? So it's not the one I want. I'm looking for where we generate the token. Here. I'm going to change this like this. Okay. And then I want to do a await context.save changes asynchronous. And the expires in, we're going to do this as the if I look at this, the expires in is what? Okay. The expires in $3,600 is time span dot from minutes 15 total seconds. And then token type is what? it's typically just the name bearer. Okay. We're going to have a bool on here. Which is optional, called generate access refresh token. I'm going to set that to be true. And now we can go our refresh token equals string.empty if generate refresh token. Then we're going to do this. And we want to add this if it's not null. Okay. Let's go ahead and run it now. One more here. Like that. And if I look here at the authorization header, we don't have one. And if I was to add in one, there it is. Now what we want to do is I want to say var authorization split equals authorization dot split by the space. If authorization split is less than or equal to 1, if it's less than 2, then we want to do a bad response. Up here underneath where it was talking about the general tokens. Okay, I think we're done here. And then we're just going to return a bad request for now. We'll figure out what we were supposed to return in a minute. And now what I want to do is in C#, I want to decode base 64. So to do that, we're going to do a convert from base 64 string my authorization split dot last. And then I want to do encoding.utf8.get string from that. And now I want to split that again. And we want to split it by that. So what I want to do here is I want to make a base 64 encode online. And I want to do liveordevtrying at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this says that we were allowed to append them to what? Okay, so it's this. So over here, when we hit this, I can type in my authorization, and we're going to put it in as a bearer, and we'll run it. Okay, this time we get our authorization header. We split it. We decode it. We split it. Perfect. And now I've got my client ID equals decoded credential split dot first, and my client secret equals decoded credentials split dot last. That's good. Okay. So in this token request, we can also add in here a string for client secret. And here I want to say if my string is not null or white space of authorization, then you want to do this. Otherwise, it's going to be set to the what's in the request. And that's it. When we look down here at the authorization token scope, we register scopes with the tokens. When we request authorization, here we are. Now we're into the nitty-gritty of how this works. And now we're going to write them for each of the specifics. Well, when you generate your token, I just want to pass in the GUID for the client ID, the GUID for the application user ID, and so here I could do client equals await context dot clients dot first or default asynchronous, and we want to get the one where my client ID is equal to client ID. And we also want to have on the base entity a bool called active. Which means that over here, when we generate this token, we can pass in our client ID. We don't know the application user ID yet. This is IP address. And we're going to go ahead and do generate refresh tokens to be true. Okay. And we don't have any of the logic associated with the validation tokens or the authorization tokens yet, so we need to write that in. But we do have our token request, our response, our app exception here. Now we don't have a validate token yet, do we? So let's add that. We want to have another function down here for public virtual void revoke token. And we want to pass in here a token and a IP address. Hey, if you need a reference, check out Hey Cloak on GitHub. Lots of RFCs around OAuth, OpenID Connect, the JWT, and identity code. It's a bit of a rabbit hole depending on the grant flow. The authorization code is harder than the crawling credentials. Yeah, I haven't heard of Key Cloak, but I've done a lot of work with Identity Server and Identity Server 4. It's because that's no longer going to be public, is why we are doing this. Keycloak is open source and easy to manage. I will definitely check that out. So here, I'm having a hard time finding where it's decoding these. Right here. So down here, we're going to have another one called public virtual void validate token. And we're going to do a new token handler. Same like before. We're going to get the key. And we want to have the client ID here, asynchronous task, and async. I want to do my client equals await context dot clients dot first or default asynchronous, where my ID is equal to my client ID, and it is active. The key here is encoding.ASCII .get bytes of my client.secret. Then what I want to do is I want to do my token handler .validate token, and we're going to do that for the token. Validate token here. And we're going to pass in the token and then our new validation parameters. And it's validate issuer signing key is true. Issuer signing key is equal to my new symmetric security key of my key. My validate issuer, we want to say true. My validate audience, we want to say true. We're going to set the clock skew to 0 so tokens expire exactly at token expiration instead of 5 minutes later. Right here with a clock skew equals timespan.0. And we're going to send out my validated token. And then I want to get my JWT token from my JWT security token called a validated token. And then I want to get my application user ID, which is my int.parse of my JWT token claims. And we want to get the first one where the type is equal to ID. And then here from this, we can return the GUID for the application user ID. We have another thing that we need to do, which is to be able to revoke a token. Let's go back into account service, and I want to add another function in here. Call it public virtual asynchronous task called get refresh token. And we want to get the refresh token, which is the context.refresh tokens, and we want to get the first or default asynchronous, where the token is equal to token and it is active. Now, if we have a refresh token, now I want to get my application user equals await context.application users dot first or default, the one where the ID is equal to the refresh token dot application user dot ID, and it is active. We could say if my refresh token is equal to null, then I can do a throw new app exception, called it invalid token. if your refresh token is not active, then we want to do a throw new app exception invalid token. Then we're going to get our application user. And I want to return here a refresh token and an application user. Like that. And this is going to be a refresh token. Like that, okay? Didn't see we've also got remove token or revoke token. Right here, revoke token. And in this one, I want to get my refresh token and my account from my get refresh token asynchronous of my token. Okay, and then I want to say my refresh token entity dot revoked equals datetime.utc now. My refresh token entity dot revoked by IP is going to be my IP address. My context.update your refresh token entity. And then you're going to do a return await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0. Which means this can just do it as just a refresh token. That looks pretty good. Come on. Possibility for setting the revoke time in the future, not following the time field requirement. I have it hard-coded, but I can set the times. Let's do that. In the account service, here's our time. So in my client, we want to have a bool issue refresh tokens, and then an integer for the refresh token expiration in minutes. And we'll just default that to be 15. And so here we can say if my client.issue refresh tokens, and this is going to be client.refresh token expiration in minutes. Down here where you're creating this, JWT, that's it, subject. And we'll rebuild it. Okay. So I need to have some seeded data. And I can do that by looking at, oh, not this one. Not that one either. I need to grab some seeded data example here. Well, we could just do this. ASP.NET C# 3.1 seed data entity framework. This is where it is. So it's inside of the onModel creating. Like there. And then I do a model builder.entity of my client. And we want to do it for a implicit. And then we're going to do has data. And we're going to add this new piece of client implicit. All right, you have to add the application user ID. Client ID is test client. Secret is test secret. Refresh token and expiration is minutes. Issue refresh tokens will be true. We also want to do a model builder.entity of my application user. Has data. Like that. We're going to say it's a new GUID. We're going to say var default ID equals, and we can just do a new GUID. Like that. Identity Server, nice project. This is my daily job for 3 years, says Invisible Programmer. Working on Identity Server 3 and 4, or working on your own Identity Server for an application? Tell me more about what you mean. I've done a lot of work with Identity Server 3 and 4, but because they're no longer being publicly offered or supported after November of next year, that's why we needed to create this. Okay, so everything looks pretty good now. When I'm passing in the token here, actually, we made the identity service for several LogMeIn products. Oh, that's cool. So you are literally working on the identity server. No, I'm creating a new one. I see. Okay. The client ID is coming from the credentials, but then after that, how do we know what the client ID is? Because we get issued the JWT, which should include the client ID, I believe. So let's go ahead and add some connection strings. So I'm going to create a new class called globals. And then we can use this one. Let me just change it a little bit. Okay, so this is the one we'll use for the identity server, which is this. That's it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a add migration for my init. I hope you'll be here later. I have to put my daughter to bed. We'll be about 20 minutes. This topic is interesting. Sounds good. I have an appointment at 12:30, and then I'll be back this afternoon. Is Entity Framework not installed? Microsoft. We need to add a NuGet package here called Microsoft.entityframework.core.tools. And now in my startup, I should be able to do my options here. And I should be able to do like a use SQL server. Add DB context entity framework core. Use SQL Server. Okay, kill another. Thanks so much. I'm sure I'll see you again. We'll be back this afternoon if you want to come back and kick it again. So I'm looking here. It's not telling me. Thank you, Matthew Esk Olin. How are you doing? Welcome to the channel. Appreciate the support. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to pop them into the chat. Microsoft Entity Framework for SQL Server. Okay, and then we want to pass in here my connection string. Which is just this globals. Okay, let's try it again. We'll add another migration. No database provider. It needs this constructor, which passes in a base of my DB options. Try it again. So now it says that this one needs an ID here. There it is, and we can do an update database. Okay, when we run this again, we're passing in here the application ID, the user ID, that was interesting. So if I look over here and I do a base 64 encode online, and I want to do liveordevtrying, what is the things that I chose for this test client, test secret. Test client, test secret. So when I ran this, I updated the database. So if I look here at SQL Server, here it is. There's my client. We'll have to figure that one out here. So, all right. I've got to take a break. I have an appointment coming up here at 12:30, so that's just in 12 minutes, and then I'll be back in this afternoon. So let me say that we'll be back at 2:00 p.m. PST. 2 p.m., which is just like 2 hours from now. So thanks again for staying with me today. If you have any questions, make sure you check us out at our Discord, discord.pixelhorrorstudios.com, and I put all these videos up at youtube.pixelhorrorstudios.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in just a couple hours. Bye-bye.